When you're getting started, it's definitely can feel a little bit daunting. I understand that. I know when I first got started, I was really afraid that I was going to do some type of command, completely delete my system, mess it up. Um, and that's fair because this is the first time that you're kind of dealing with, or maybe potentially the first time that you're dealing with uh, interacting with your system through the use of commands. And so understanding where you're located in your system through the file paths and understanding what the commands are actually doing is all really important. Um, so we'll talk a little bit about that today. We're going to talk about which commands to be a little bit cautious of, and then overall kind of show you the basic flow of what commands you're going to be using in your day-to-day as you're navigating through and managing your file system. Um, Outside of it kind of feeling a little bit daunting, it's also kind of cool, or at least it was for me, because it was kind of the first time or first experience that I had where it felt a little bit like being closer to a hacker. I was watching a lot of Mr. Robot at the time as well. So it's like, cool. I'm like halfway there and can kind of like follow some things. But it's fun. You're going to be using it pretty much every day as a programmer. It's going to be the main way that you manage your files, that you access files, that you use programs to locate other files that a specific file is using, and then also how you're going to be running those programs. So you're going to have to get familiar with it, and it's something that you kind of can pick up pretty quickly as you're going through. So yeah, I mean, when I first started, I was very hesitant to do anything for the fear of actually messing up my system. About maybe a month or two in, just having used it every single day, it kind of became second nature. So I expect that if you guys continue along this, if you're just in the prep course, decide to go into the core curriculum, you'll feel it'll be natural at some point. So you'll understand how to move through your system and what specific commands to be cautious of when you're actually like performing those commands. So yeah, already covered the basics of what if you need to get a hold of me, use that Q&A. It seems like that is working great. And at any point, if you have a question, if you need me to go back and talk about something, or if I'm moving too quickly, just feel free to reach out there, and I'll keep this pulled up on the side and try and answer everything as it's coming through. All right, let's move on. So what's on the agenda today? First, we're going to take a brief look at what the command line is and why we use it, followed by some key terms that you'll likely run into when reading and talking about the command line. One thing to mention is that the commands we'll be using today and that you'll be using in the Launch School curriculum are going to be working on computers that run a Unix-like operating system. So that means primarily any Linux distro or Mac OS X, mainly because Windows operating systems interpret the command line using a different software. So it's likely that most, if not all, of the commands that we see today won't function on Windows. And then after talking about that, or about the command line and some of the key terms, we'll take a look at the structure of a command, and we'll look at some of the primary commands that we're going to be using and what they do before diving into the topic of file paths. Once we covered some of these main components, we'll look over a file system that I've constructed, and I'll post a series of questions talking about navigating through that file structure. This part is where we encourage you to participate, as it gives me an idea of which concepts you guys are understanding. And then we'll look over the answers for each question and talk about why an answer was correct, why it was incorrect, just for the overall purpose of trying to make sure that we understand how we're navigating through our files. Then in the last section, I'll have you guys follow along. We'll pull up our terminals. I'll pull up my screen, my terminal, and we'll just focus on what these commands are doing, how to use these commands in our terminal, and how they're kind of populating files and things like that. So that'll be the last section, and then I'll wrap it up with taking questions. So any questions that you guys have, feel free to ask throughout if it's something that we're talking about in the moment. If you have anything that's maybe not related to the moment, or if it is urgent, like feel free to absolutely ask at any point. Otherwise, feel free to collect questions, and then I'll stick around at the end and you can ask. Okay, so what is the command line? The easiest way to think about the command line is just that it's another way for you to interact with your computer. So we use a range of interfaces in our daily lives, whether that's using your finger to scroll social media on your phone, playing music by interacting with Alexa, using your mouse to access different sites on your web browser, or navigating your files in the command line. All of those are made possible through this exposed, what's called an interface, that allows you to input information and have your computer perform some type of action based off of that, and then send back a response as well. So a key part of that is that you send information to a computer, the computer processes that information, sends back a response. In regards to working with file systems, a lot of us have experience using a graphical user interface, a GUI, that displays a virtual representation of your file system. And the File Manager GUI lets you open files, drag and drop them in new locations, or update them by using your mouse to interact with the interface. However, as programmers, you'll frequently be using this interface known as the command line interface. Unlike the GUI that lets you navigate software with a mouse, the CLI, command line interface, uses mainly text for input and display. So this means that when you're working in the command line, you'll be entering commands via text or via your keyboard, and in turn, your computer will log some output in the form of text as well. A lot of the functionality that you get from a file manager GUI you can perform using the command line, such as creating and deleting files and directories, downloading software, and installing updates. But you can also perform a variety of other tasks that can loosely be categorized as system administration, such as managing connections with servers, monitoring system logs, creating, updating, querying databases, which is something that you'll learn in the Launch School curriculum as well. And all of that's a little bit out of scope of what we'll talk about today, but just meant to demonstrate that the command line can be used for a wide range of tasks, just not only the GUI tasks of moving files around, but it can also be used for a lot of other tasks that are a little bit more focused to what you'll be doing as a programmer. So while today we'll be focusing on how to use it for file navigation and management, this is a tool that you'll be using frequently for a multitude of situations for the entirety of your career as a programmer. So you might be wondering, why would you want to use the command line for file management if you can perform all of these tasks with a file manager, with a GUI? For one thing, learning how to use the command line allows you to perform multiple tasks from a single window where you might otherwise need to be navigating between several applications. Additionally, as we'll see here shortly, once you become proficient with the command line interface, you can perform a lot of these tasks even quicker using a command line or using the command line. And you'll be able to move through entire files to new locations, filter selections, create multiple files, or entire file structures just with a few commands. There's also automation that you can do that you'll learn later as well. But essentially, you'll be able to do a lot of these tasks that would normally take dozens, if not more, clicks of the mouse. You can just perform them instantly. Those points aside, ultimately using the command line is beneficial for two main reasons. You can be more precise with the actions that you're performing, and you have more power in how you manage your system. Using these text-based commands allows you to be very specific about what you're telling your computer to do and how you want to do it. And then being proficient in the command line gives you access to a variety of tools in their raw, powerful form, and also allows you to diagnose issues with the software that you're using, whether that software is your own software or somebody else's. All right, so when you're working with the command line, there's a couple of common terms that you'll repeatedly hear in regards to the different aspects of its functioning. First one is going to be terminal, and the terminal is a program that opens a graphical window that lets you interact with the shell. So it also provides a place to enter commands and view output. So right now, if you've seen the command line at all, that's going to be a graphical representation that's called the terminal. So then if that's the terminal, what's the shell? The shell is the software that provides a way to interface with the operating system using commands. In Unix and Unix-like operating systems, there are two main shell environments. The first is going to be Bash, which stands for Born Again Shell. And Bash is the default login shell for most Linux distributions like Ubuntu, Mint, Pop! OS. And then the other one's going to be Z Shell. And Z Shell is built on top of Bash, which means that it has all of the original functionality of Bash, but with additional or modified features. And Z Shell is going to be the default if you're using Mac or if you're using Kali Linux, which is another Linux distribution. So while there are some differences to the two shells, we're not really going to be encountering them today, other than maybe one. The main difference is going to be that you might notice from the start if your prompt is a $sign, then that means that you're using Bash. And if your prompt is a Z shell, then it'll be a %sign. And once I show you guys the structure of the commands, we'll be able to talk about what a prompt is specifically. All right, so whichever prompt that is displayed there, that'll be an indication of what shell you're using. But if you want, you can also use this command here, which is which, and then $shell, which is going to be the environment variable that hosts the location of your shell, and then whatever that like ends off that file path, it'll either be bash or it'll be Z shell, and that'll be an indication of what type of shell that your computer's using. All right, so looking at this a little bit more, because still, like even knowing the definition of terminal or knowing the definition of shell can be a little bit unclear. So I've got this picture here. It's a very old version of really what a terminal is back in the day, even though it kind of looks like a little bit closer to what we consider a computer being. All of this was a terminal just meant to communicate with a computer, which back in the day probably took up the side of an entire wall. So in this case, the terminal itself would be the entire system, this computer right here. And then the software that it's running that allows it to communicate with the computer is going to be the actual software, or is going to be the shell, rather. The shell is the software. And so that's really similar to how it is today with the terminals that we pull up on our own computers. The only main difference is that instead of having this physical system, there's another program that's displaying a graphical representation of this physical system, which is the terminal. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some terms that we'll come across when we're dealing with file paths. So the main ones here are going to be the working directory, the root directory, and the home directory. And the working directory is just a way to talk about the current directory that we're located in. The root directory is going to be the topmost directory of your file system. So it's represented as a / prepending any other addition to the file path. Whenever your file path starts with a / that / is going to be a representation of the root directory. So the very top of your system's files. And then lastly, we have the home directory. And the home directory is the directory that's owned by a user. If you've ever logged into a computer that was maybe in a library or a part of your school, you've had to use your own login information, and then all of the files that you add whatever documents, files to, generally are going to have like your username prepending it. So the home directory is the document that like kind of has your name, your specific login information, and it's where all of the files that you interact with on your computer are going to be nested. You can see the file path here where we remember if it starts with a / that represents the root directory, and then we have a directory called home, and that directory called home houses all of our user directories. So it can be a little bit maybe confusing when you're talking about it. The home directory is actually this specific username directory. So for me, it would be JD Fortune. For you, it would be your name. And then the directory called home is the directory that houses all of the different individual log users. And so that's a way of like kind of branching out, essentially like a hierarchy of all the files, so that when you access your specific login, you're only seeing your files, the files that are relevant to your user. So anyways, whenever I say home directory, I'm going to be talking about this user directory, oftentimes represented as this file path from the root directory to home to user, where all of your files are located. And because it's so common to be accessing the files in your home directory, there's a shorthand here, which is this tilde and a /. And so this little shorthand representation is just a shorter version that expands out to this, which is root directory, the directory called home, and the home directory, which is your username. All right, so now let's talk about the structure of a command. So I mentioned a prompt earlier. This right here would be a representation of a prompt in Bash because it's got this prepending $. If you're using Z shell, then this is where it would be a % instead of a $. So there's a few components that make up the structure of a command. We've got, again, the prompt here, which, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we're actually dealing with the live interaction point later. But you've got the prompt, you've got the command itself, and then you have these arguments here, which you pass to the command. The arguments can be broken up into either flags or file paths, where flags are how we get more power. We get more access to like kind of the raw form of a specific command by telling it, getting more specific about what we want this command to do. And then the path is how we dictate where we want this command to be performed. A lot of times, if you can leave out the arguments. So if you leave out the path itself, then you're going to perform the command on your current working directory, the directory that you're located in. And if you leave out the flags, then it's just going to run as its default. In this case, we're being specific about where we want this command to be performed, and we're being a little bit more specific about what we want it to do. So the ls command is a list command. That means if you're in your terminal, you type in ls, it's going to show you all of the files, all of the directories that are located in the current working directory that you're in. So we pass it two flags here. We have --l, which is going to be a shorthand for long form. That just means we're going to get more information about what's inside of our file. If you do ls by itself, then you might just get the names of the files. But if you do the long form version of it, you can get who created it, when it was created, what type of permissions you have for it, which are like read, write, execute permissions. And so -l will just give you more information about it. -r is a little bit more of an advanced term. It stands for recursion. And in this case, if courses is going to be a directory in this case. Recursion just means that we want to not only see the files that are located in this file, but then we want to perform ls on any files that are located in there. And essentially, you're just going to get all of the branching files and directories that exist from the point that you start. So don't worry too much about that. That's like definitely a more advanced topic. It's just maybe the best way to think about it is that this is going to perform this ls command consistently until it gets to all the files in the branches that no longer have any more directory or any more folders. All right. So as far as file paths go, here's an example of another file path. So we've got this shorthand version, or this tilde shorthand for home. And then each of the successive names that end with a / are going to be directories themselves until we end here at a file that's, and you'll usually have some type of extension, in this case .txt. So essentially what's happening here is we're moving all the way from the root directory into from the root directory into the directory called home, into your user directory through the shorthand, and then into an environment directory. Then directory 1 is stored inside environment, and we're basically moving further and further down until we reach this file called file.txt. File paths are just a way that you can give kind of directions or instructions to your computer for how to access a specific resource. And there's two ways to talk about file paths or to display file paths. You can either do it through an absolute file path or a relative file path. And this is an example of an absolute file path. Really what that means is that you're starting at the root directory. Since the root directory is always going to be the top of our file path system, or our file path rather, that's an absolute file path because we always have this starting point, whereas a relative file path is going to be starting from your working directory. So if we were located in directory 2, then we could still access file.txt, but we could use a relative file path to do that by just accessing directory 3 and then file.txt. So we'll now look at the absolute and relative file paths, I believe. Oh no, we're going to talk about some file path symbols, and then we'll move into looking at file paths. All right, so some common symbols that you're going to see. I mentioned this earlier, but anytime that a file path starts with the /, that / is going to be representing the root directory. So in this case, this is an example of an absolute file path because it starts at the root directory here and then moves through our system into the directory called environment. As far as navigating through relative file paths, so if you're located, further into your system and you need to move up a file path or even further down, but basically if you're trying to move up, you've got a couple of options for passing these specific symbols. Or this one here is the double dot /, which allows you to move further up your file path. So A single dot forward slash is the current working directory. Oftentimes, this is optional. You don't have to pass it if you're accessing a file or a directory that's already located inside of your working directory. But then, if you're trying to move up your system, then you need to use the double dot notation. And so this will move you up one level in your working directory. Yeah, so I've got an example here of a file path or a file structure that I've constructed. And if you were located here in the gym directory and you wanted to move up to to the environment using a relative file path, then you could use that double dot notation and it'll send you up here to environment. And from that point, you've got access to these three directories. You can also concatenate those together. So let's say you wanted to move up two directories, you could just keep adding double dots. So if you're in gym again, you add a double dot, it gets you to environment. You add another double dot, it gets you to, in this case, the home directory, which is this user directory here. So yeah, you can basically, again, to like the way to think about file paths is that you're starting at a specific location, or at least with relative file paths, you're starting at a specific location, and it's the instructions that you're giving to the computer for how to move through your file structure. Again, we've talked about the shorthand for the home directory, which is this tilde and forward slash. So you'll see that a lot. And then there's also, to go into kind of some of the power that you can have with the command line, there's this splat operator here. We won't really use this too much, although I'll probably show a demonstration of it once we get into actually working with our own terminals. Basically, this just stands for 0 or more of any character. So if we saw that ls command that we looked at earlier, which will list all of the files in a specific directory, if you were to pass it this file path and then in that with a splat operator and then the .rb extension, then it would say look for all of the files that have 0 or more characters and then end in .rb. So you could list all of the just Ruby specific files in your folder. So this just gives you a little bit more power if you're trying to filter out some of the selection, if you're looking for a specific folder or a file rather. Okay. So yeah, I've got this file path constructed or file structure constructed. And now we're just going to take a look at some absolute and relative file paths, try and give us a better sense of how these work. And from there, I'll move into the quiz section. And I'll just throw you guys up a couple quizzes. We'll basically be set up where we're starting in a directory, we're trying to go to another directory, and then you can choose which file path looks like it's the most optimal. Okay, so here we've got absolute and relative file paths. So let's just say we start off in the bedroom directory and we're trying to get to gym. So we're in this directory right here. We're trying to move over here to the gym. The way that I like to think about it, beyond just like being directions, if you were actually seeing a physical structure laid out like this, you could almost imagine like you've got a character or a pin on the specific working directory where you're located, and then it's these steps that you're taking to get to the directory that you want to go. So in this case, from the bedroom, we have to move up one directory for a relative file path at least. We have to move up one directory to get to environment, and then we can move down into gym. And so if we look at the relative file path, we've got this double dot notation. It moves us up one directory. And then from there, we have access to the bedroom directory, the gym directory, and the school. So we just designate that we're going into the gym directory. Again, with anything, you can always use an absolute file path. So in this case, these are equivalent file paths, both starting at the root directory. This is just using the shorthand. But essentially, we are just moving from the root directory through all of these files until we get down to gym. Starting up here, moving to our directory called home, our home directory, and then environment and gym. All right, and we'll look at a couple more of these examples. So let's say we're in locker right here, and we're trying to get to dresser, which is all the way over here. So again, we could use an absolute file path. We could start at the root directory, move through the system down into environment, then bedroom and dresser. So again, we're in the root directory, moving through our system, down into environment, bedroom, and dresser. We can also use a relative path here where we use the double dot notation, and then we use it again, concatenate it, so that we're moving up two directories, and then we can go to bedroom and dresser. So we're here in locker. Yeah, locker. We move up one, we're in school. We move up two, we're in environment. And then from here, we have access to all three of these directories. We choose bedroom and then dresser. And then lastly, we've got one where we're in environment, we're trying to get to gym. And this is the only one with two relative paths because, again, that single dot notation is optional. So if we're in environment already, we have access to these three directories. We could just type in gym and it knows already to get us there. We can also, if we want to be more explicit about it, we can use single dot notation as well. And this single dot just means this current directory, this working directory that I'm located in. And then the other option for an absolute file path is to start at the root directory, go all the way down until we get here to the gym directory. All right. All right, we're not going to open up the terminal yet. I have a couple of these out of sequence, but I'll move back up to that in a second. And I'm going to share some polls now. If I can find them. Yeah. All right. So we're going to move through these. Hopefully I have these in order. I just had to recreate these today. I'm going to post a quiz and it'll tell you where we're starting. In this case, we're starting in dresser, moving to locker, and then you'll have some file paths available to you. One or more of these could be correct. So just put in what you think is accurate, and then we'll take a look at them later. Don't worry about being wrong. I don't see whose answers are who. I just see the percentage of who picked what. All right, so I'm going to launch this and give us about 2-ish minutes, maybe a minute and a half, depending on how quickly people put in answers. All right, I'll give it about 20 more seconds. All right, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to end the poll. Okay. Wait, can I not move this over? Oh, I can share the results. Perfect. Yeah, this is all new. Okay, so y'all should at least be able to see the quiz. Maybe I'm not showing people's answers, but maybe y'all can see that. All right, so we started here in the dresser and we moved all the way to the locker. So looking at the first one, which is going to be the double dot notation. So moving up one directory into bedroom and then trying to access school and locker. So nobody picked that one. Good. So that one's incorrect. The second one is correct. So it's got two concatenated double dot notations. So we're here in dresser. We move up one. Now we're in bedroom. We move up two. We're in environment. And then from there, we just move into school and then down to locker. So that one's correct. We also have the third one, which is an absolute file path. We start at the root directory using that shorthand notation, go down to the home directory, then into environment. And then from environment, we're trying to access locker, but we're not able to because all we have access to directly are going to be the bedroom, gym, and school directories. So that one's incorrect. The last one is also incorrect. We're located in dresser. We use the single dot notations twice, actually. So we're just saying this directory, and then trying to access environment. We're still in dresser here, so there's nothing below that we'd be able to access. All right. My screen went away. There we go. All right. Here is the second quiz, and I'm going to change this as well. about 20 more seconds. All right, 5, 4, 3. All right, everyone turned it in. In pull. All right, and I'll share that one. So this one actually had a couple that were correct. So this first one's going to be correct here. This is an absolute file path where we start at the root directory, and rather than using the shorthand, we just type in directly all of the directories that we're moving um, through our home directory into the environment and then into Gym. So the first one is correct. The second one, nobody picked. Good job. That shorthand would have already gotten us to here where all we could access was environment. So that one's incorrect. The third one, I believe that one's correct. Yeah, so we use that shorthand. We're here. We go into environment and then Gym. So that one's good. So in this case, the first and the third one were correct. And then the fourth one's incorrect because we're up here in the root directory. The only thing, at least in this structure, that we would have access to is this directory called home. All right, good job, y'all. All right, we've got a couple more of these. I didn't want to do too many polls, but yeah, let's just do these next two. Oh, and I'll change this. All right, 10 more seconds. All right, and stop. All right, nice job. Yeah, so it looks like you guys are getting this. The two correct ones in this case were the first one, that double dot notation, and then backpack. So we're on locker, we move up one, and then we move down into backpack. Perfect. The second one, maybe a little bit tricky, especially maybe if you have like bad eyesight. There is a single dot there. So otherwise, if that were not there and this were an absolute file path, this would be correct as well. Because we have that single dot there, this is actually saying from this current directory inside locker, and then we're trying to navigate to backpack. So that one's incorrect only because that single dot's there. Nobody picked the third one. Good job. That one would have moved us up two, and then we're trying to move into backpack from environment. Then the last one's correct. It's another absolute path, which moves us from here down through these folders all the way to backpack. Great. All right, so we've got one more, and then we're going to move over to the live follow-along coding section. Let's see, I lost my polls. All right, here we are. Oh, wait, I didn't change this. I'm sorry. All right, couple more seconds. And I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. All right. All right. So in this case, I might have gone a little bit overboard. All the last 3 were correct. The only one that's not correct is this top one here, where we're started in school and we use that single dot notation. So we're saying from this directory, let's move into environment, but all we have access to are locker and backpack. So that one's incorrect. All the other ones are correct. The first one, or the second one technically, is an absolute file path going from the root directory all the way down to dresser. This third one is going to be from school, moving up one into environment, and then down into bedroom, and then down into dresser. And then this third one is a little bit wacky, but it's still a relative file path that works. First thing we do is say, hey, we're in this folder. We use the single dot notation. We move down into locker, and then we move up to school again, and then up to environment, and then down into bedroom, and then dresser. We had fun with that. But yeah, that one's correct too. And nice. All right. So yeah, basically, as far as these go, um, the way that I just think about it is I've got my working directory. I've got like a pin on one of these directories, my working directory, and then if I'm trying to access something from the absolute file path, it's always just going to be that same file path to this location. If I'm needing to access something relatively, then it's I have this pin here, and then what are the steps? If you think of like Monopoly or something, like what are the steps that I'm taking to move to whichever file I'm trying to access? All right, and now we can move into opening up our terminals. So I'm going to pull up my system here, but while you guys, while I'm doing that, feel free to pull up your own terminals. It could be one of several ways depending on what system you're using. For me, it's Control Alt T, but for you, it could be any of these other versions. And then this is kind of a last case scenario. Go to your search bar and look up terminal. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to this now, and that seems very small. All right, let's see. Actually, I want that visible too. You guys able to see that or read it? Actually, I wonder if I can just move this over here. Maybe I can read it too. Okay. Um, I'm gonna assume that everybody has their. Oh wait, I didn't leave that. I'm gonna assume that everybody has their terminal open, unless you tell me that it's not. So we can go ahead and get started. And essentially, I'm gonna have these commands up here, and we're just gonna move down them, talk about what each one does, and how we can use that in our system. But the first thing that I want to do before we do anything is I want to make a test folder and then navigate to that just so that any actions that we perform while we're talking about this are only going to affect this test folder. So the way that we create a folder is going to be by mkdir, that's make directory, and then we need to pass it a name. So in this case, let's just pass it test. I also have a kind of graphic display of my file structure here. So you can see when I did that, I created this test folder. But currently, I'm still located in environment. So I need to navigate to that, and we'll do the cd command, which is going to be change directory. And I'm going to move into test. One way to know if you're actually typing in the correct way, or even if like you're the directory that you're wanting to be where you think you are is there, is type in the first couple of letters and then hit tab, and then it should fill it in if that directory is located there. The more, I guess, directories, files that you have with a specific name, the more letters you have to type in, because it has to be only one possible case scenario for it to actually fill out. So in this case, if I had mkdir teach, then now I have teach and test here. And if I'm trying to move into test, I could type in TE, but tabbing won't do anything. It'll be like, hey, you've got two here that could possibly be the answer. So I have to type in that other S, and then I should be able to fill that in. All right, so all of that is a little bit, yeah, all right. I just used this clear command here to clear my screen. That's if you get a little bit messy in your terminal. So far, all we've done is mkdir and test. That created our test directory, and we did cd test, and that moved us into our test directory. A lot of the time, you'll have a path to working directory located on your prompt. So like we talked about earlier, this $sign here means that I'm running bash for my shell, and this is the prompt, but really all of this is the prompt here. In this case, the prompt a lot of times will show you more information. One of the most common is going to be that it has the path to your working directory. So it'll show that available to you, which is really helpful if you're trying to navigate and move through your directory. And then in this case, I also have my username. So like the name of my home directory is located here, which is EC2 user. If this is not located in your terminal, there's another way that you can access the path to your working directory. That's just going to be pwd. So I can type in pwd, and then it shows me this here is my, oh my gosh, my home directory, and then environment and test. But you can see here it's completely expanded out, whereas here in my prompt, it's just using that shorthand, that tilde and /. Okay, so now that we're set up here, let's just start playing around a little bit. So the first thing that we want to take a look at, even though we just kind of did, is the make directory. So again, that's mkdir. And mkdir can be used to make one directory. It can be used to make multiple directories at once, depending on how many arguments you pass it. So let's make a couple of directories here. We can just be simple with these. We can call this 1, 2, I'll throw in a third one, 3. So when you have a space separating these arguments, it's going to make 3 different directories here. And if I hit enter and then I expand out my test here, I've got 3 new directories. I have 1, 3, and 2. So in this case, it's going to alphabetize them. I think that's probably in all cases, it does it alphabetized. Yeah, so if I do the ls command here, which again lists all the files, all the directories that are located in my working directory, then I have 1, 3, and 2. So all of these folders. Okay, so once we have these, we can start messing around with adding files to our structure. Let's just pick, we can stay in this directory for right now. So if you're trying to make a file rather than a directory, the command for that is touch. And I always forget to look up why that is. So every time this webinar happens, I'm like, I don't know why it's touch, but it is. So touch creates a new file. You can pass it a name. I'll just pass it my file. And then usually you'll want to end it with an extension, and the computer's smart enough that whatever extension you use, it'll know that it's that type of file. So if you're using, say, MD, then that's a markdown file. And then if you pull it up in some type of application that reads markdown files, it's like, oh yeah, I know how to read this. And it will turn your markdown into actual better looking text. So touch myfile.md is going to create a file in this current working directory called my file. All right. And this looks a little bit confusing because it looks like I just created it in 2. But I think that's just because it's missing the, okay, yeah. So if I expand this, then you can see that there's nothing in any of these directories. And then we also have a file inside of this test directory here. And if I do the ls command to list all of the files located here, you can see I've got myfile.md. I've got my 3 directories here, 1, 3, and 2. All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about being able to use, or I guess we didn't really mention this. So with a file path, or the arguments that you're passing to a command, even though in this case it looks like we're just giving names to these specific objects, we really are, all of these are file paths. It's just they don't look like it because they're relative file paths. So if I wanted to, I'm located in this test directory. I could create a file all the way in the to directory as well. So if I say, let's just do it, let's do it two ways. We'll do it through an absolute path, and then we'll do it through a relative path. So this is our path to working directory, our, uh, yeah, starting at the root directory all the way to test. So let's create a file. I don't know what we'll call it. We'll figure that out when the time comes. So we've got the touch command to create that. And then I can just really copy all of this, hopefully. I'm going to delete that and paste that in. Don't actually worry about figuring out the absolute file path right now, because you could create that file anywhere. But if pwd pulls up your absolute path to working directory, then yeah. So I can follow this along, and then we wanted to create it in, what was it, directory 2. So I'll just append the directory 2 here, and then we'll just call this another file .txt. So rather than passing it a simple name for a file, I've passed it this entire absolute directory and the computer, or absolute file path, and the computer is going to follow that line until we get into directory 2 and add another file.txt to that. And you should see that show up inside of my 2 directory here. So I'm going to hit enter, and we've got another file. It's indented from this file, so we know that this is actually located inside the directory called 2 rather than inside this test directory. And so we did that while being located in the test directory. So to do that relatively, I guess we could say touch and then just add that. Again, it's the optional in this case, but we can say third file dot, make this a JavaScript file. So third file.js, and then I just use that single dot notation to say from this file. Oh, we're not actually doing that. We're saying we're putting this in directory 2, but from this file, go to 2, and then add this to third file.js. And you can see that we've got this JavaScript file, and it even actually acknowledges, oh yeah, it's got a symbol for every single different file type that I've made here. But your computer will acknowledge them as the file type that you're designating via these extensions. All right, so now that we have used touch to make a few files, let's look at another command here. So we've got the mv command, which is move, or we can also use it to rename. And the way that you do that is going to be dependent on how you pass in the arguments. If you want to rename a file, let's just move into the 2 directory right now. We'll use the cd command and type in 2. So change directory to, I'll hit enter. You can see that that got added to my file path here in the prompt. And then I always kind of just use ls whenever I go to a new directory to make sure I know what I have available to me. But let's say that we want to change third file, because I don't like that name, to new file, because that's a lot better. So I'm going to use the mv name, and mv takes 2 arguments. The first argument is going to be the file path to the file that you're trying to rename, and then the second file path is going to be the file path where you want it to move to. And then if you add a new file name at the end of that, then that's going to be renamed as well. So in this case, we're not going to move this anywhere. We're just going to call third file new file. So I'll say third file. I use the tab, and it's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then I can say this single dot notation for let's not move it anywhere except for this current working directory, and we're going to call it new file.js. And then so if I hit enter here, then we see over here my third file changed to new file. If I type in ls, I have another file.txt and new file.js. So that's how we use it to rename. The only difference between renaming and moving is that with moving, you're just moving it to a new location. You can actually move it to a new location and rename it at the same time, or you can just leave off the end file name and it'll just move the file and not rename it. So let's say, let's move another file.txt into, what do we have here? Into folder 1 or directory 1. So I'm going to say move mv, another file. And then what I need to do from here is move up 1 into test and then down into 1. So I'm going to say ... Now we're in the test folder. And then I can type in 0, or not 0, and then hit tab, and now we're in 1. And then, so if I just leave off another file.txt, then it's going to know that we're not changing the name. So I can hit enter here. And then now another file.txt gets added to this one directory. All right. And then while we're at it, let's move a directory that's not even located where we're currently located, such as myfile.md, into this directory 3 here. And so how are we going to do that? Well, we need to do the mv command, and then now we need to be able to access myfile.md. So right now we're in directory 2, so we need to move back up to test, and then down to, or once we're in test, we can access myfile. So I'll use the double dot notation here. And then I'll say myfile.md. And then, so now I've got access to that. And then now we can just move this wherever. We could even move it here. So let's say we actually want to move this to directory 2. Then I'll say move it to this current directory. And rather than be myfile.md, I want it to be my, I don't know, markdown. I'm bad at naming on the spot. I'll hit enter here, and now it's my markdown.md, which got moved out of the test folder and into 2. So you can kind of move around whatever you want. And yeah, I think that's that kind of covers what move does. Okay, let's take a look at. Oh, we're a little bit over time. Apologize if you guys have to run, but we've just got a few more that we'll show here. So yeah, we've covered changing directories. Really, you just do cd command, and then you can kind of move around wherever. So in this case, let's move into directory 1. So let's say cd move up 1. Now we're in test, and then we'll pass 1. And so you can see that my path to working directory moved up 1 level to test, and then I had access to 1. Now we're located here. And then we'll look at the cp command, which is going to be copying. And similar to the move command, it will take the first argument, which is going to be the file path to the file that you want to copy. And then the second argument that you pass to it is going to be the file path where you not only want to store this copy, but then you need to include a name for it. I don't think it may actually default add a name. We can try that out right now, actually. Okay, so we've got another file.txt. Remember, we're going to get rid of this file later, so we don't need to worry about doing anything weird within, as long as we're within the test folder and anywhere lower. So we've got another file located here. I'm going to say copy. I'll say another file, and then I'm just not going to add anything. I'll add this second argument here to just be the relative file path to the current working directory. All right, so you do have to actually add a name. We learned something new. So we can't have another file called another file. So we can just be like, I'm just going to call it file.txt. So it's a txt, so might as well also call it a txt here. And then if I hit enter, then now we've got these 2 txt files, another file and file. This was maybe a bad example of this because you can't really tell that this got copied, but I'll say I am another file, and then save that. I think that's saved. And then so let's run that command again. Only this time I'm going to have to give this a third name. You don't have to follow along here unless you want to. But essentially, I just added text to another file, and then now I'm doing this copy command and then giving it a new name. And then now if I open up file 3, we can see that it's copied over all the information there. All right. So we've taken a look at the copy command. Again, this similar to move. These are not just names; these are file paths. So you can kind of, from any location, move files, create files anywhere. as long as you know like the file path to get to that location, whether that's an absolute, whether that's a relative file path. And now we'll look at the remove command. And so this is really the only command that you need to be really cautious about using, because this will permanently remove your files. So we will do this a couple of times here, and just we'll want to make sure that what we're deleting, we're sure that we want to delete it before we start making changes. Because if you, let's say, for an example, move up to your home directory, so I say path to working directory. If I were to move up to this home directory and then remove EC2 user, then I've lost every single file that's associated with my username. So be sure that like you're deleting what you want to delete when you're using this command, but it's the rm command. And it takes a flag also if you're trying to delete a directory. In this case, we're just removing a file. So I made that file.txt as a copy of another file, but that was before we added information to another file.txt. So file.txt I don't need anymore. I'm just going to remove it, and I'll type in rm file.txt. And then when I hit enter here, it's going to have removed the file. And let's navigate up one level to go to test here. So we'll just do change directory and then throw out this double dot notation with the /, and that'll move us to test. And I'll show you what happens if I try to delete a directory without adding the flag that you need. So I can say rm, and then I'll say remove one, which we know that that's a directory. I hit enter, and it's going to say I cannot remove one, it's a directory. So the way that we tell that to do it is to pass it this --r. So I can say I'm going to remove 3 rather than 1 just because we don't have anything in there. So I'll say rm -r3. And this kind of similar to the ls command that took a -R. This just stands for recursive. And recursive just means to repeat a command over and over until we get to like the base result of it. So in this case, with the remove command, we would be deleting this directory here for 3. And if it had further directories in it, then we know that we're deleting everything below the level of 3, basically just chopping off the branch. So I'll say rm-r3. And now we've removed the file 3. I can press or type in ls to show what we've got left here. And we've just got these 2 directories. We've got directory 1 and we've got directory 2. Since we have information in another file and file.txt, we can move back into directory 1. So let's just say cd 1, and we'll be located back in directory 1. I just realized I probably moved really quickly through a lot of that here. Hopefully you guys are following along. All right, so we removed 3 here with the rm-r. Yeah, I'll just leave all of this up. I do ls again because I'm just curious about what's left in my file structure. And then I'm now located back in file 1. And so I'll do ls again, and I've got these 2 files here. And we'll move on to cat. So Nano works a little bit weird in Cloud9. I always forget what the save command for that is. But essentially what it is it's a command line text editor. So similar to VS Code and things like that, it just allows you to add text to a file. So if I were to say nano another file.txt, then it pulls up this, and I can actually add to the file here. So I can more lines. And then here's where I actually am not 100% sure if I'm saving or not. Oh yeah, okay. We figured it out. So yeah, Nano just pulls up a text editor. I don't usually use it, but it's there if you just want to like add a single file to, or a single line to an existing file. Normally I just use like VS Code or whatever text editor you like to use. All right, so that's what Nano is. Cat is a way to read what's inside of files. The reason it's called cat is because it concatenates the text from files. So in this case, we could say cat, and then I'll just type in another file.txt, and we can see that all my text is here that I've added. But the reason that it's cat is because we can add multiple files. So we do have two files here. I've got ls, another file, and file3. So I can say cat, another file, and then I can say file3.txt. And when I hit enter, I can see that I've got this file here, which is another file, and then it looks a little bit clunky because there's not a new line here. But I am another file. So that comes from file3. So it's just taking the text from both of these files, concatenate them together. You can pass any number of files to cat, and it will just take all of the text and open it up. All right, and so now we kind of get to our last, really our last one command here. So we've already seen pwd. It does a path to working directory. So the man command is short for manual, and this is really good if you're new to using a specific command or you want to know more about it. It's the manual for whatever command you pass it. So in this case, manual is the command, and then the argument you pass it would be another command. So I can do man ls, which is the list command. And you can see up here that we've got name ls, list directory contents, and then you kind of have a description of what it does. And then all of these here are going to be the flags. So different ways that you can get more power over that command or figure out different ways to use it to be more precise with what you're trying to perform. So yeah, let's see if we can find that dash uppercase R. So in this case, dash R, and this is the other way that you can do it. So a single dash is usually going to be just the first letter of whatever command you're doing, and then you can use a double dash if you wanted to write out the entire word. So double dash recursive or single dash capital R is going to list subdirectories recursively. So all the directories that are later inside of that branch. So yeah, if you're ever using a new command, use the man command, and that'll show you all of the commands available, or all of the information available about that command. And now I have to figure out how to get out of here. All right, perfect. Cool. All right, so that is pretty much everything. I hope that made sense, that we didn't move too quickly through everything. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and the last thing that I'm going to show you guys before we move into the Q&A is, sorry, I can't do something and talk at the same time. Still figuring that skill out. But the last thing I'm going to send you guys is going to be over here in the chat. Here it is. Okay, good. In this chat area, I'm going to show you the link to the feedback form. So it's not necessarily necessary for you to send back feedback, but it helps us to make these better. And I like to hear what people thought of the webinar. So as soon as I find that, then feel free to fill out the feedback form. Until that point, I'll start taking questions while I'm looking for that. So does anybody have any questions about stuff we've gone over? There it is. All right, I knew it was somewhere. All right, I'm going to post this inside the chat. How did you exit? Oh, Q. Yeah, anytime like a terminal pulls up something that you're trying to get out of, except for nano, which is a little bit different, it's going to be Q, like lowercase q. All right, so that's yeah. Let me know if that doesn't work. What is the difference between dash lowercase r and dash uppercase r? That depends on the command. So like we saw when we were using the rm, the remove command to recursively remove directories, that was dash lowercase r. But for the ls command, it's dash uppercase r. So that it just depends on what the command you're using, and you can find that information inside of the man, or by using the man command. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? I guess I'll ask a question. Can you guys see that feedback form? Just make sure I posted it in a way that y'all are able to see it. Okay, good deal. All right, what's the easiest way to help with finding the file path to a specific folder slash file for navigation rather than trying to memorize the file path? Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of times when you're dealing with file paths, I might just try and share my screen again here because it's maybe a little bit easier to explain while we're looking at something. But when you're working inside of your own like folder or like a project or something like that, it's kind of when you're going to be dealing with multiple files through the command line most often. And so you'll either have like memorized the project folder or have like something visible. Like if you're working in VS Code and you've got a full project pulled up, then you're going to be able to see the file structure. And so you're going to know like, okay, I'm in this file right now and I've got to move up to this one and over here. As far as like getting used to all of that, it's just a matter of repetitions. The more that like you do it, and I mean, really, it only takes maybe a month or so of just like I've been doing this every day before you get used to it. But yeah, I mean, if I'm located, wherever in my directory and I'm trying to find a file that I really have no idea where it is, I'm probably going to use the GUI to like sort through things because it's just faster than having to like move to a new file, press LS, move to a new file, press LS. I mean, I guess I could like move to the root directory and then do ls-r to like show everything that exists in my entire system. But that's also just a lot of text that you then have to parse. So yeah, I guess that's my answer. I use the command line to navigate through like smaller sections of my files, or in like if I know exactly what path, like all my launch school notes are located in a folder that's inside of my desktop. So anytime I'm going to the terminal to access those, I just know the exact path. And beyond that, like I really only use it inside of projects where it's just like, oh yeah, this is the relative path that I need to access this file. How comfortable do you have to be on the command line before moving on? Is it bad to have a GUI of the file structure to look at while practicing? No, not at all. Whatever helps you. Um, I mean, I think it's like definitely good to know how to use the command line. I wouldn't spend like too much. I mean, I don't know. Like other people might feel differently about this, but feel like you kind of understand it or at least like are aware of it and then move on because you're going to get like so much practice as you're moving through the core or like wherever whatever track you choose. If you are in a specific track, you're going to get a lot of time like dealing with the command line, so you'll just kind of pick it up naturally as you're using it that way. And yeah, I wouldn't spend too much time other than like definitely read through it, but you're not going to be quizzed on knowing the command line, and then you'll pick up what you need to know. And then you always have that book available to you if you are curious. All right. Yeah, any last questions? I somehow turned on like automatic subtitles and it's doing a really good job. I don't know how to turn it off, but I'm like talking and then it's putting that into text a lot better than my phone does. All right. Well, cool. If no one else has any questions, thank you so much for your time. I know we went a little bit over, but I appreciate you hanging around. And if anything does come up, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in Slack. My name's JD Fortune there. But awesome. Appreciate you guys and have a good evening.